Welcome to episode 144 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we continue with the tales of Troy, and part 2 of the story of Odysseus continues his tale, the stories of the Sirens, Skyla, Charybdis, Thrinacia, and the herds of the sun god, Shipwrecked, Odysseus and Calypso. When we had burned the body of our comrade and buried his bones in the earth of Aeaea, we heaped a burial mound for him and set a pillar on it. Circe received us with warm hospitality and provided us with ample stores for our further journey. The first adventure of which we had been forewarned by Circe awaited us on the island of the Sirens. These are nymphs who sing so sweetly that all listen spellbound to their song. They stand on a green shore and lift their lovely voices whenever a ship comes by. But he who is beguiled and lands and is destroyed, for the coast of their island is strewn with bleaching bones. When we reached the realm of the Sirens, the fair wind which had floated us gently on suddenly stopped, and the sea lay smooth as a mirror. My comrades lowered the sails, folded them, laid them down in the ship, and began to row. But I thought of Circe's words. When you are close to the island of the Sirens, she had told me, stop up the ears of your companions with wax so they can hear nothing. But if you yourself desire to hear the song, have them fetter your hands and feet and bind you to the mast. The more you implore them to let you go, the more they shall tighten the ropes. Then I remembered. I cut a slab of wax, kneaded it until it was soft, and when it stopped up the ears of my men, they in turn tied me to the mast, plied their oars, and calmly rowed through the waters. When the Sirens saw the ship, they came to the edge of the shore in the shape of beautiful girls and raised their clear-toned song. Come, famed Odysseus, glory of all Greece, turn from your course and hearken to our song. Ere now has never dusky ship sailed by, but that its helmsman paused at our sweet voices, took his full joy of it, and went his way, made wiser by the tale of what he heard. For we know all the toils that in wide Troy Trojan and Argive by God's will endure, and in our wisdom know all things beside that come to pass upon the fruitful earth. As I listened, my heart almost burst with a yearning to go to them. I motioned with my head that I wished to be loosed from the mast, but my comrades could hear nothing, rowed the faster, and two of them, Eurylochus and Perimedes, came and tightened the cords as I had bidden them. Not until we were safely out of reach of the siren song did my companions take the wax out of their ears and cut my bonds. I thanked them for remaining steadfast in ignoring my entreaties. After a short while I sighted a fountain of spray and heard the roar of surf. This was Kiribatis, a whirlpool, which 3 times a day shot out from under a cliff, and in the backwash sucked down any ship which happened to pass at that moment. My men dropped their oars in horror, and the tide threatened to carry them away. The ship did not move. Then I jumped from my seat and went from man to man, speaking words of courage. My friends, I said, we are old hands at meeting danger. Come what may, nothing worse can befall us than what happened in the cave of the Cyclops. But even there, I found a way out. Now you too must do as I say. Grip your oars, for they had caught them up from the sea, and make straight for the surf. I have faith that Zeus will help us. You, our helmsman, shall guide the ship as well as you can. Keep to the rocks, so that we will not be caught in the whirlpool. In this way I warned my friends of Kiribatis, but I said nothing of Skyla the monster. Circe had described to me, for I feared they would again drop their oars and lose them. And in my concern, I forgot another piece of advice Circe had given me. She had told me not to gird on armor for the fight with this monster. I, however, put on my cuirass, took 2 spears and went to the bow and prepared to meet Skyla. But though my eyes ached with peering about, I could not discover her, and I waited in deadly fear as the ship came closer and closer to the Narrows. This is how Circe had described Skyla to me. She is no mortal foe, but rather immortal disaster. Courage cannot prevail against her. The only possibility of escape lies in flight. Her house is opposite Kiribatis, a steep rock whose jagged point is always hidden in gray cloud. In the middle of this rock is a cave as black as night. Here Skyla lives and proclaims her presence by a loud barking, whining which sounds like that of a young dog. This monster has 12 shapeless feet and 6 snaky necks. At the end of each is a hideous head and 3 rows of gnashing teeth, ready to crush her prey. Half of her is concealed in her cave, but her heads she puts out of the cleft and fishes for seals and dolphins and other large creatures of the sea. Never has a ship passed her without losing some of its crew. Usually she snatches a man with each pair of her toothy jaws before anyone is even aware of her nearness. This was the picture I saw in my mind's eye, and now the ship had come close to Kiribatis, which was sucking in the sea with greedy mouth and spewing it out again. This water seethed like a kettle over the fire, and white spray filled the air. But when the tide was drawn in, the sea looked turbid. The rocks seemed to thud with thunder, and one could look far down into a cavern of black slime. When we stared, spellbound, and our helmsman steered left and away from the whirlpool, we inadvertently came too near Skyla. At one gulp, she snapped up 6 of my comrades. I saw them struggling in the air between her teeth. One moment they moved their arms and legs convulsively and cried to help. The next, they were ground to pulp. I have suffered much on my wanderings, but never have I seen a more pitiful sight. And now we were safely through the Narrows between Kiribatis and Skyla, and before us lay Thrinacia, shining in the sun. The roar of the surf died away, and we heard the lowing of the sacred cattle of the sun god and the bleating of his sheep. Misfortune had freshened my memory, and I immediately told my companions that both Tiresias and Circe had bidden me flee the island of Helios. This grieved and annoyed my companions beyond measure, and Eurylochus said angrily, "Odysseus, you are a cruel man. You are made of iron and inflexibility. Do you seriously intend to deprive us of the rest we need so much? Are you going to prevent us from setting foot on this island and refreshing ourselves with food and drink? Must we ride on over the Black Sea through the long night? Suppose a tempest overtakes us in the darkness. Let us at least anchor near this friendly shore until the sun rises again." When I heard him rebelling against my counsel, I knew very well that a hostile god was planning our destruction. All I said was, "Eurylochus, it is not difficult for you to persuade me, for I am one man against many. I shall yield to you, but first you must all swear a sacred oath not to slaughter a single one of the sun god's animals, no matter how many herds of cattle or sheep you may see. Let us be content with the provisions Circe has given in such abundance." They were all willing enough to take the oath. We entered the bay from which the fresh water poured into the salt, set foot on the land, and prepared our meal. When we had eaten, we began to lament our friends, whom Skyla had devoured. But we were so tired that we fell asleep in the midst of the weeping. Perhaps 2/3 of the night had gone by when Zeus sent a roaring gale at dawn. We rowed our ship into the safe grotto. Again I warned my friends not to touch the sun god's creatures, for I realized that the stormy weather would force us to remain on the island longer than we had expected. It turned out to be a solid month. The south wind alternated with storms from the east, and both were against us. As long as the food and wine Circe had given us lasted, there was no trouble. But when we had eaten up all we had and began to feel hungry, my comrades went fishing and hunting birds while I walked along the shore, hoping to meet a god or a mortal who could help us in our distress. When I was well away from the rest, I washed my hands in the sea so that I could pray with clean palms outstretched and begged the immortals to rescue me. But all they did was make me drowsy. I fell asleep. While I was gone, Eurylochus rose and gave dangerous counsel to my companions. "Listen to me," he said. "We are in great need. Death is terrible in any form, but the worst death is starving. Why should we hesitate to sacrifice the finest of the cattle of the gods and satisfy our hunger on the remaining meat? As soon as we reach Ithaca, we can propitiate Helios by building him a splendid temple and filling it with precious gifts. But should he be so angry that he sends a tempest and sinks our ships on the way, well, I for my part would rather die instantly by drowning than drag out my life famishing slowly on this island." My hungry comrades were really well pleased with these words. They immediately singled out the best cattle from the herds of the sun god, prayed to the gods, slaughtered the beasts, wrapped the entrails and haunches in fat, and offered them up to the immortals. Since they had no wine left, they sprinkled them with water from a spring. The rest of the meat they put on spits. They were just about to eat when I awoke and smelled the odor of roasting from far off. I raised my hands to heaven. I said, "Oh, Father Zeus," I cried, "you made me drowsy to destroy me. What crime have my men committed while I slept?" In the meantime, the sun god had already been told what had occurred in his sanctuary. Angrily, he summoned the immortals and complained of the wrong done to him. He threatened to drive the sun chariot down to the underworld to shine among the dead and never again light the earth if the evildoers were not sternly punished. Zeus rose from his seat in majesty. "Do not stop shining for gods and men, Helios," he said. "I myself shall shatter the ship of those robbers with a thunderbolt and sink it to the bottom of the sea." These words of Zeus were reported to me by Calypso, who had heard them from Hermes, the messenger of the god. When I joined my friends, I reproved them bitterly, but it was too late. The cattle had been slaughtered, and frightful signs made it clear that a crime had been committed. The hides of the bullocks crept about as if they were alive. The meat on the spits bellowed, but my hungry men paid no attention to these evil portents. For 6 days they feasted. On the 7th, when the storm seemed past, we boarded our ship and steered for the sea. When we were out of sight of land, Zeus massed a roof of black blue clouds right over our heads, and the water grew darker and darker. Suddenly, a furious gale swept on us from the west. The mast broke and fell, sweeping the sails with it. The whole weight landed on our helmsman and cracked his skull. Like a diver, he plunged headlong into the waves, and the water swallowed his body. And now, lightning struck the ship, filling the air with sulphurous fumes. My companions fell from the deck and struggled like sea crows until they all sank. I was the only one left on the ship, and I paced the decks until the sides broke away from the keel. But I had my wits about me, seized the back stay made of oxhide, and lashed the mast to the keel with it. On this raft I sat, called on the gods, and let the sea toss me hither and thither. At last, the storm abated, and the west wind died down, but the south wind began to blow in its stead, and filled me with new terror, for it threatened to drive me back to Skyla and Kiribatis. And this really happened. At dawn, I saw Skyla's pointed cliff dwelling and the swirling waters of Kiribatis. The whirlpool swept my mast into the abyss. I myself seized the bough of a fig tree growing on the rock, clung to it, and hung in the air like a bat until my mast and keel were spewed up again. The instant I saw them, I let myself drop on my raft and used my hands to row frantically away from those angry waters. But I should have lost had not Zeus floated me past Skyla and guided me safely out of those narrows. For 9 days I was tossed on the sea. On the 10th night the gods had pity on me and cast me ashore on the island of Ogygia. There Calypso gave me food and drink and nursed me back to health. But this, my last adventure, I have already told you, O king. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back with more tales. Many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.